Muzariri. Did I pronounce that right?
Yeah, Muzariri. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
amazing.
That's a
Thank you
very good
so
attempt. Yeah,
much. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And we're going to dive into talking about some of the legal pitfalls to watch out for especially people that are trying to buy a house here
yeah,
in Australia. And we want to tailor this conversation to immigrant, especially African immigrant. And I think that, as we're seeing a lot of people come into the country
yeah,
due to migration, there's a lot they have to grapple with. And buying a house, renting, all of that is a big part of the process. And we
yeah.
just want to talk about some things, some key point to know, to have at the back of your mind if you're trying to buy a house here in Australia, which is a very, very important part. But yeah, I've got Peter. Peter is Zimbabwean born and
Yeah,
is a lawyer. You schooled in New Zealand, as
yeah,
I found out, and you're now in Australia. You've been here for a while, and you're specialized in finance, property law. I'll allow you do the intro and just give people like a teaser of your background and what you've been up to so far.
So basically, yeah. So I'm Peter. I'm from Zimbabwe. So I was born there,
Yeah.
and then when I was about 7 years old, that's when I moved to New Zealand,
Yep.
and then so I did all my schooling in New Zealand. So I finished off primary school, high school, university, got
Wow.
to uni, and then I did my double degree. So that was a bachelor's degree in commerce and an honors for in law. And
Mm,
then, when I graduated at the end of 2020, COVID had hit New Zealand, and so there was an issue of trying to find jobs and everything. And so when I
yeah.
was thinking about life options in terms of what to do, that's when I decided to move over to Australia. And then so
Mm,
I came here end of 2020, and then started looking for work, and then started practicing law about mid 2021. So it's been about 4 years now.
yeah.
4 years. What's the date today? Actually, 2 days ago, 4 years. Yeah,
Wow.
which is nice. So yeah, so then I started doing that. So my main area has been it's a couple of things: so finance law, so borrowing, lending money,
Yeah.
property developments, and especially the structure and like the finance aspect of those things,
Yeah.
and also wealth management. And so like dealing with like investment management and wealth and how people plan for those sort of things, especially like in a family context. Like how do families get other generations in the family interested and participating, and how do you figure out the way you not only build wealth but pass it on to future generations as well.
Mm,
So yeah, last month my business partner and I, we decided to open our own law practice. So
yeah.
we've opened that now. So that's based here in Melbourne. So we provide services across those key areas. So one is finance, so borrowing and lending. Then with commercial, so that's your businesses and contracts and everything like that. Starting a business, you want to change your business structure, everything. Then we've got property stuff, so like conveyancing, property development, and then wealth. So that's your family trust. How do you structure your affairs? Where do relationships come into it, and planning for those sorts of things. So that's what we're doing now. Yeah.
No, that's amazing, and many congratulations to you and your partner. I know
Thank you.
what it is to start a business here in Australia. It is tough, and
Yeah.
it's also rewarding, especially when done right, like you're doing, which is great to see. We're gonna dive into that a bit more, towards the
Yeah.
end, to share a bit more about how people can engage with you.
Yeah.
But let's start with Makadip.
Yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
speak any Zimbabwean language?
Yeah, I speak it quite fluently. Yeah, yeah, actually, I do. I can speak,
Yeah.
read, write, everything. Yeah. So when I was
Ah,
growing up, my
yeah.
parents were they were very serious about not letting me forget the language,
That
and
was
so
good.
they were very active in terms of trying to make sure we keep speaking and everything. So
Yeah.
I've tried to keep that as a part of daily life. Like if I speak to my parents, I'll try to bring in Shona as well quite often. Like dad, we speak mostly in Shona a lot of the time. When I
Yeah.
speak to family back home, I try to like message them in Shona as well. Just those sorts of small steps just to keep the language going.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I can still speak, read, write, and stuff. Yeah, nah, the parents wouldn't let me forget.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mentioned that because you did mention you moved to New Zealand at 7, right?
yeah.
And so I'm like, yeah, that's. I'm not sure. Do you like really go home to Zimbabwe for
I,
like
I
visit?
do. So we left 2004, and then so it's ever since. How many times have we been back? We went back 2011.
Yeah.
Sorry, 2007. Sorry, 2007, 17,
Mm.
19, end of 23, and I was just in Zim for like almost 2.5 months from January to mid-March this year. So I'm
Ah,
trying to actively go back home more often. So ideally, especially now that we've got the business up and running,
yeah.
a big thing for us was being able to work flexibly and I can spend time back home and stuff. So I'd like to keep traveling more often, yeah. Not
Ah,
just
that's
Zim, but also just check out a few spots around Africa. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah, definitely. And that's always good to just, go back home,
Yeah.
establish that connection, keep that going. And then Shona and Ndebele, is
Yeah,
it
and Ndebele is
alright?
the other big language in Zim. Yeah, I can't
Those
speak
two,
it
yeah,
unfortunately. What I do,
yeah,
I am interested in learning it.
yeah,
But at the moment I can't speak it. But it's a nice
yeah.
language. Yeah,
Oh
it's a
yeah,
nice
it
language.
is. I realize you guys have like 16 languages, official languages. I'm like,
Yeah, we have
oh my God, like that's a
a
lot. Like, but which
yeah,
one
in
is the most
Zim.
popular? Is it Shona or like English?
I'd say I would say Shona. Like the official like English is also one of the official languages, so a lot of the time people use it, but it's almost a battle between the two as to depending where you go. Like obviously
Oh,
if you're if you're particularly in the business sector and that sort of thing, people use English a lot more in business context.
yeah.
But Shona is spoken quite a lot as well. Like
Wow.
even if when I'm there, if I go to a shop or something, that's my first instinct is just to speak Shona.
Wow.
Yeah,
Oh, that's great. That's nice. And one other fact that I was actually very surprised about was the fact that you spend USD. Like I was watching a
yeah,
documentary from one lovely YouTuber, Tayo, I know. So he went to Zimbabwe and he went
yeah,
to like one of those I think Victoria Falls.
yeah.
Have you been there?
Victoria Falls, yeah, we went at the end of 23, start of 24, that holiday. So that was actually our
Ah.
first time going. So we went as a family with my cousins and stuff.
Oh yeah, yeah. So I realized it was documenting how like they actually spend USD. I'm like, oh my god, USD. So like the currency is even stronger than Australian dollars. Like how do you so for people that are studying here,
Yeah.
how do they manage that? So if you make money and you're kind of like sending money back home, so it's like you're sending lesser currency, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's interesting, right? Because like there is a currency that's officially recognized in Zim, right? And
Yeah.
then, but on a day-to-day basis, people actually use US dollars. Like if you go to a shop, people typically pay with US dollars. That's the way
Yeah.
everyone prices things now.
Yeah.
Um, But yeah, like when you're living here and you send money back, it hits you. The exchange rate hits you.
Yeah.
But
That.
the only saving grace I think about it is that because cost of living and everything is a lot lower back home in Zimbabwe, right?
Oh
The
yeah.
money that you do send to people goes a much
To
longer way. It goes a long
oh
way. Yeah.
yeah, because I was like thinking about like so everybody, for example, naira is not
Yeah.
as strong as Australian dollar. So if I
Yeah.
send money back home, like it goes longer. Like so, I was like,
Exactly.
how does how does that work? Like if you're spending USD so strong, and if you're even like sending money back home, is it not gonna look like oh like this money is worth less? But
No,
yeah, I think what you just
it's
said.
yeah, like it's sort of interesting, right? Because it depends where you go. Like if you go to certain places in Zim, like when I was there, you'd go to certain areas, certain shopping centers and stuff, and you look at the
Yeah.
prices. And sometimes I was like, even if I compare, like this is actually a lot more expensive than Australia in terms of certain
Mm,
things. But then if you go to other areas, certain things you get very cheap. And for example, like in certain areas, accommodation is a lot cheaper. So also, yeah, like day-to-day living is a lot cheaper and more affordable, that kind of thing. So you
mm,
wouldn't really, even though the exchange rate it hits you when you send money, you wouldn't be spending the same numbers that you'd spend here in Australia.
yeah.
So and typically a lot of family, like when you do send the money back home, they appreciate it because over there in the context of those prices, it goes a long way. Yeah.
Yeah, all right. I think that makes sense, really. All right, let's dive into, we had a conversation and I did say there are a lot of people, especially, African community that I support. Like,
Yeah.
if you like, I train and coach people that are trying to get into new career here to support them through that process. And also, we have some Zimbabweans in our
Yeah.
community as well. In fact, I just had a pod last week with one of them that just got a job, the
Yeah.
government, and just
Brilliant.
brilliant. And on Slack, I think one other person was congratulating him, and he was like, I can't remember the word. It was like, can I find it? It's like Mokoto or something.
Makoro Koto.
Yeah, yeah. I think
Yeah,
that's.
yeah, that's how we say congratulations.
Oh,
Makoro
that's how
Koto.
you say
Yeah, yeah,
that.
yeah.
I'm
Yeah, no,
like,
that's how
yeah,
congratulations. Yeah.
teasing them like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
Zimbabwe Connect. Yeah, that's great. All right. So yeah, as I was saying, there are people that are trying to, buy property, get into that. What is the role of like a property lawyer when it comes to purchasing like a house here in Australia?
So the role of a property lawyer is
Mm.
really to help you do a couple of key things. One is to make sure that you get the right information that you need about the property, right? So often when somebody wants to buy a house, there
Yeah.
will be like a bit of homework that we do on the property, right? Like
Yeah.
certain we call like searches. Like you'd search for certain things to make sure that the property that you're buying it doesn't have any like undisclosed issues that you don't know about.
Yeah.
So that's sort of like the homework stage before you actually go ahead and transfer the property into your name and it's all done. So you want to do that homework to make sure that what you're getting, there's no surprises that come up. And it's for land in general as well.
Yeah.
Like no surprises come up. You know everything that's going on with it, and it aligns with what you're thinking, right? So the property lawyers do their due diligence on your part and just make sure that it all checks out. Also reviewing the actual contract itself, like so when you're buying, just making sure that the contract is the way it should be, and you have everything in there that you need and the protections that you should have. And if there's anything in the contracts that is sort of like an alarm bell, then they can tell you about it and talk to you about that as well. And just to make sure that before you sign, you understand what's going on in there. And the other one is, I'd say, to actually arrange the transfer when the time comes, and to
Mm.
make sure that it gets taken from the seller's name into your name. The process is done properly, smoothly, and then after that, that's when you start to own the property, and then you can go about your way and celebrate. Yeah,
No, no, that's important information. The reason I'm asking is like some people may not actually know, the vital role that property lawyer actually plays. So that's why I'm asking that. But just at the back of that, if there was something like a structural issue that is not like obvious to the eyes, maybe some things with the foundation or something wrong, but it's not like you didn't catch it during initial inspection. Like, how would you help in that instance? Is there a clause in the contract, like cooling off period or something that helps protect that, or like how? Because you wouldn't see it as well, even though
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah. So what you normally do in that case, you'd want to have because you can make the contracts to buy a house conditional on certain things, right? The two key ones that I've personally dealt with is like finance. So you can make it
yeah,
conditional on the bank finally, like formally approving your finance. The other one that's relevant here is what's called a piston building inspection. So what you just basically do when you negotiate is you say, fine, but I want to make sure that I get a registered builder to come and have an inspection of the house.
mm,
Then the contract becomes binding on both sides. And so what you do is you just contact. There's a range of them, I think, who do provide that service actually, where they do the building inspections. So basically, they send one of their qualified builders out to the property. They'll come inspect the property inside, outside, and they'll tell you, and they'll do a report for you, which says this property, we had a look at it. There's these defects, these are serious issues, these are not serious, and they'll be very methodical about it. And so when you look at the report, you'll be like, okay, I can actually go into it knowing the house has these issues, these things are fine, these are major. And then once you find things that are major, then it allows you to have the opportunity to be like, okay, well, how do I want to proceed? Is it something that I want to ignore and I'm happy to proceed regardless? Or is it something that's going to make me sort of sit back and think, okay, how can I approach this? Or you might decide, okay, it's too much of an issue, then I don't want to go ahead with the purchase. So
mm,
that's how you deal with that issue is you'd get one of your building inspectors, and typically they call them pest and building inspection. So they just do
Mm.
both of those things. Yeah.
No, that's very useful information there. So if they may, has there ever been a situation where they actually have liability, like they do something that's not, maybe they missed out on a very critical situation with the house, and are there protections there if that happen? Have you seen any like that?
No, because mine has mostly, this is mostly my partner's area. Mine has mostly been
Mm.
the development side and contracts as opposed to residential. But what
Okay.
you'd want to do is just make sure when you're engaging them, you know what the scope is that they're going to cover.
Mm.
Like when you're engaging the inspectors, just to make
Yeah.
sure that you know what they're going to do, what they're not going to do, and that type of thing. And this is where the homework also comes in because there's different options as to who can do it. So you just want to make sure that the ones that you're getting, you know, are qualified builders, and the company that you're using has, you know, good reviews, good reputation, that kind of thing. So you can do that sort of homework. But in terms of dealing with that from a defect slash where it gets sort of breaks down, that
Mm.
side, in my experience, doesn't really touch on that side of things. Yeah,
Right. Right. Thank you.
unfortunately. Yeah.
No, that's all right. In your own experience so far, what are some of the pitfalls or mistakes that you've seen, maybe first time home buyers make when it comes to legal, framework perspective?
Uh, this is a fun topic.
Yeah,
There are a few things I'll cover. So I think
yeah,
how many things but I'll try not to spend too long on it because I'm mindful of time as well.
yeah, that's
So
all
I
right.
think I had 5 or 6 things, but I just jump through each one. So
Mm.
the first thing is I think generally a house is one of the biggest financial commitments that most people make in their
Yeah,
lifetime, right? So I
absolutely.
think we need to approach it with the seriousness it deserves, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a few things that are relevant here. So the first one I want to talk about was legal advice. And so when you're buying a property and you're buying a house, there are two types of professionals typically who can help you. There's conveyancers and lawyers.
Mm.
Conveyancers, they assist you with like the property related and transfer stuff in terms of the property. But there is a scope to the services they can actually provide you and the advice
Mm.
because they're not necessarily lawyers, right? And then you can actually get lawyers who they can give you more holistic service and advice beyond just the conveyance and transfer aspect of it
Mm.
and the purchase aspect. And so at our firm, we take a holistic approach to it. And so the way we see it is that although your the immediate thing you're doing might be buying the house, we consider this in the context of like your life as a bigger picture so
Mm.
that you're buying the house, but also it's about where are you trying to go with your life and how do
Yeah,
we do it in a way that that aligns with where you want to end up ultimately, right? Because I think it's good to be proactive in terms of the direction you're going. And
absolutely.
so that's where I think it's important to consider getting legal advice. You know, you can always use conveyances, but I will never be able to, you know, and you can never underestimate the value of a good lawyers being able to give you proper advice about the purchase, but also other things as well in addition to that.
Yeah.
So I'd say legal advice is one of the first things. The second part is the lending documents. And so when you borrow money to buy a property, you have to understand the documents you're signing, right?
Mm.
And one of these is because of impact. So typically you go to the bank, be like, I want to buy this house. The bank is like, cool, we'll give you the money to buy the house, but we're going to take a mortgage over the property, right? So that's actually a significant obligation that you take on from the bank, right? In
Yeah.
return for them giving you that money. And so
Yeah.
my view is it's worth investing a bit of money in legal advice so that a lawyer can actually talk you through the documents so you're actually aware of what's going on and how they work, right? Because sometimes these documents can be quite complex and understandably like very difficult to actually understand like what's going on and stuff. So I think it's
Yeah.
always good to chat to a lawyer. And this links to, in particular, where guarantees come up. So what you find sometimes is you might have parents who decide to help their child buy their property. And so
Yeah.
one of the options open to them is they say to the bank, okay, our kid wants to buy a house and we'll guarantee it so that the bank is more comfortable giving the money to buy the property, right?
Mhm.
And so what that means is essentially if the child in this case doesn't pay the bank back, then the parents will also have to pay.
Mm.
And so that's so the parents have to sign documents as well for the bank to say like, you know, we agree that if our child doesn't pay back the money, then we get on the hook for paying the money. And so here, and I'm glad that a lot of lenders and banks require for example, in this example, the parents to actually get legal advice as well, but it should always be obtained, right? Because you need to, people in that case, people need to know what's actually going on. And it's like, cool, you want to help your kid buy the house, that's nice, but just understand what that means for you guys as well, because you don't
Mm.
want a situation to arise where the child doesn't pay, then the parents are also on the hook for money and all this other stuff, and it puts their financial stability at risk without realizing, you know?
Yeah.
So I'd say that the documents themselves are one of the key things you actually got to check.
Mm.
Oh, also feel free to stop me if you have any questions or anything. Otherwise,
No,
I'll
no,
just
no.
keep
I'm
going.
just
Yeah.
listening. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I'll be
Um,
listening. Yeah.
the next one I wanted to talk about was the quality of the build or the builder. So
Mm.
this goes to whether you're buying an established home or you're deciding to do like, like a house and land package and get a new build. And so it's important to make sure you're doing your homework on the property and ask the right questions before you buy. So for
Yeah.
example, and you touched on this before, is if you're buying an established house, then you want to make sure that it doesn't have the defects that you don't know about. So you consider the inspection, right?
Yeah.
And like I said, that involves there's an expert who comes along, they check the house for defects. If there's an issue, they tell you about it, right? And so that's the first thing I'd say is the big one if you're buying a place that's already built. If you're doing a new build, like let's say a house and land package,
Yeah.
and so what you want to do is make sure you understand a bit more about the builders you're dealing with, do your homework on them, try to understand the quality of their builds as well, just to get a bit more comfort, right? Because you can't always like know everything 100%, but you want to try and at least take active steps to make sure that you've done the homework you can and you've
Yeah.
found out what you can. And so you go into it knowing, okay, cool, this is the builder I'm dealing with. They've got a good rep, their builds are good quality and everything like that. Because what often happens with new builds is they'll come with certain warranties. So, for example, there's what's called a home maintenance warranty. So the builder will say, if there's maintenance issues or anything that comes up in the house for like, let's say, the first 3 months after we give you the property, then we'll
Yeah.
come back and fix those things, right? So they do have those things there that sort of make you a bit more comfortable that, if there's an issue that comes up, I can call them and they'll come fix it. But what people need to realize is also that there are certain issues in a new property that don't come up necessarily within that time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, when I speak to people, one that they talk about is where like new properties, they take a few months before they start to crack, like in corners and this sort of thing.
Yeah.
Just as an example, but it won't be the case that every issue that's going to come up is going to come up within that
Time.
time
Yeah.
period, that 3 months or 6 months that they give you. So it's as a first step, it's probably better to try and do the homework that you can about the builder and just make sure that it all checks out before you go into it, right?
Yeah.
And because obviously, like once things go wrong, then you're trying to look at the contract and how do I get the builder to come and fix it, and then you have those sorts of issues, and then you have more legal costs if you decide
Yeah.
to involve lawyers in the process and so on. Yeah. So I think you can't substitute the homework and due diligence at the start of the process.
Mm.
My next one is government schemes. So
Mm.
information is very helpful, right? So there are government schemes that help, which are available to make it a little bit easier to buy property, right? So for example, first home owners grant, that type of thing. So what you do want to do is make sure that the advisors, like your lawyer or your broker, whoever you're working with, you understand what you're eligible for, as it can actually help and make things a little bit easier. Because if there's a scheme that's giving you a bit of extra money towards the purchase, then you're like, okay, cool.
Mm.
That takes a little bit of stress off your deposit as well.
Yeah.
So I think government schemes are really important to try and understand and get a handle on. And also, what's interesting is, so as a New Zealander as well, there is also special rules to do with bringing your super money in New Zealand. They call it Kiwi Saver over to Australia, and at certain times you can actually access that money towards buying your first property in Australia. So
Mm.
that's also like a big one for a lot of people who come from New Zealand, is it gives them the extra leg up, like in
Mm.
terms of knowing I can bring the my money over from New Zealand,
Yeah.
from their super equivalent in New
Super.
Zealand,
Yeah.
bring it over here, and then I can actually withdraw it and towards buying my first property. But again, it's all about information, because my understanding of those rules is it can only be for the first time you purchase in Australia. So if you've purchased before and then you find out about it,
You can,
you can't
yeah,
use the scheme. So again, it's all about that homework and due diligence beforehand, knowing what all the options are. Because I know, like, even in the Zim community, there's a lot of Zim people who came from NZ, right? And then, our parents, especially like our parents' generation and stuff, who move over to Australia,
mm,
and then they save for ages, and then they're trying to buy a house, and then they find out later I could have just used some of the money from
yeah,
New Zealand to help me buy. So just things like that, yeah. And two more points I wanted to cover.
yeah,
One was structure.
mm,
So this is important because the the way you structure things when you buy property has long-term consequences for you, your loved ones, because of things like asset protection, relationship breakdown, and that sort of thing, right?
mm,
And so the right structure to use will depend on where you are in your property buying wealth building journey, right? And so
yeah,
as an example, when it comes to like the first home, right? Buying someone's first property, typically people will buy that in their own name because you also get access to government schemes and stuff that make it a little bit easier, right?
yeah,
To buy property. And then so what I've seen with that's come up in my work quite often is once it's sort of the subsequent properties after the first one, then people look at things from more of an asset protection perspective. So like they may consider using another structure like a trust, like a family trust to purchase extra properties.
mm,
And so why they do this type of thing is it makes things a little bit safer because you protect your assets from creditors. So for example, if you have a business, then you know that if you buy a property in a family trust or something, then you just have a bit more protection in terms of your assets that you purchase. And also it allows like, for them to pool family resources and, pass it on to their children and that sort of thing as well. And also there's the whole relationship breakdown issue as well. Like if you want to put into a family trust so that in case someone has a relationship breakdown, then that doesn't get affected. Like especially for example, if you're someone who purchased a couple of properties before you had a spouse or a partner or something like that, right?
yeah,
And then there's this issue of self-managed super funds that's come up quite a lot is people using those to purchase property. So for people who are new to Australia, I guess like that you might be dealing with, right? Just what that means is essentially like when you're working and you're contributing your super towards your pension, right? There's a system whereby the government allows people to take that money out and then they open their own fund and then they can use
oh,
that and manage the money themselves instead of having like a big super fund do it on your behalf like most people would do. And so that's called a self-managed super fund. And so
oh,
one of the things that people do in those is they do purchase property. And so this comes up, but again, I think it's also about being aware of the legal implications because it's a very, very regulated area. There are a lot of rules around it, and there are big consequences like if you do it wrong.
mm,
And so my only thing that I would tell people is make sure that you get the right advice, legal advice, and also financial advice and everything before you pursue some of these other options. So you actually know what you're signing up for, right?
mm,
Because what often happens in this space is people will set up their own self-managed super fund and then they can get like help from administrators and other professionals who help them operate the fund like on a regular basis, right? But if something actually goes wrong, you're still responsible, even if you hired an advisor to help you with it, you know?
mm,
So you want to make sure that, again, you get advice being like, this is what this is. I understand how it works. These are the responsibilities I have, and I can actually undertake those responsibilities. Because for some people, they might say, nah, it's too much responsibility. I don't want to do it, which is also fine. So that's the third point of structure. The last one on structure is tax, which is obviously always important for people, right?
yeah,
And the thing I would say here is if you use the wrong structure, it can have very disastrous consequences. So, for example, in relation to capital gains tax, right? So, if you buy a property in your name, or if you use a trust or a super fund that's allowed under the rules, you get discounts on CGT, capital gains tax, but not if you buy with a company, right? Just a company. So there's those sorts of things to just make sure that you have like lawyers and stuff who like give you the advice, like this is the structure you should use and all of that. And so that's where if someone's considering buying like their second or third or fourth or whatever property, then we can just assist with making sure that you have the correct structure because what you don't want to do is purchase the wrong structure and purchase with the wrong structure, and then later when you try to sell or something, then you've all of a sudden got more capital gains tax than you thought you'd have to pay. Yeah.
Oh my God, that's so insightful. I see why you guys value is what it's weight in gold, honestly. And that the first question is like, just on the back of that is like, oh my God, you guys know so much. You have so many information. But then that's
It's
why,
yeah.
yeah, you go.
No, it's because I'm passionate about this stuff, man. I really,
Yeah,
really enjoy this stuff. Like, I really, really enjoy it. That's the
yeah,
nerd in me, right? But there's areas of law that I don't know anything about, and I'll be telling you, mate,
yeah,
let's
yeah,
get somebody who's more specialist in that area
yeah. I
because that's
know.
not my thing. But when
Yeah,
it comes to these things, especially like when it comes to how people structure their things, I've always found it fascinating, right?
yeah,
And just because I was a big tax fan when I was at law school, I loved it. And so it
yeah,
just got my mind thinking about all of these things and just, thinking about, okay, if you use this structure here, what does this mean here? But hey, if we put this here, then maybe we can do it like this, you know?
yeah.
So I find that stuff really, really fascinating. So yeah, it's
Uh,
it's all about that advice and it's I think that's where the value is that the lawyers and the not just lawyers but financial advisors and everything that you deal
yeah,
with, that's why it's good to get good advice because they've spent the time getting
uh,
educated and
yeah,
knowledgeable and gaining the experience, right?
yeah,
So you get the benefit of that, right?
yeah.
um, because I remember there was like one time I remember I was like, this is something else. I was in a park. I went to a park and it was like a Saturday and I was sitting there and I was literally just reading a book about super because I
Mm,
just wanted to know this stuff. I was like, oh, okay, this is useful to know. But I'm like, yeah, some people might be like, oh, that's boring. But yeah.
yeah, yeah.
But no, I love this stuff. So that's why, yeah, I
No,
just
I
try to
can
know more about it.
I can definitely see that. And that leads me to access, right? So sometimes for someone like me, I'm like, oh yeah, I need an accountant. I have one. Oh yeah, financial advisor. You need a lawyer as well. But then not just a lawyer that knows one part, like for example, immigration or whatnot. You need to have holistic, well planning, like you do, for example.
Yep.
Especially if you're trying to get into business and you've got
Yep.
like other investment like share stock and you want to get into property and you run a business and there's so many things there.
Mm.
So what for somebody in that space, what advice would you give? Should the person start with maybe an accountant, like, or should they like just go like holistically to someone like you, like the lawyer but specialize in wealth management, can do everything and give advice, and then you can then go implement? Or what is your advice there?
Like I would say, like for a lot of people, I understand that, especially if you're starting out in business or you're trying to buy a first property. The other big consideration is cost, right?
Cost, yeah.
Because I know that like us lawyers and stuff, we're not
uh
we're not cheap. They're
no.
not cheap, right? Like personally, like I think it is good to at least I think it's always good to have an accountant, right? I think
Yeah,
accountants are worth
yeah,
their weight. A good accountant is worth their weight in gold. Yeah, so you can't really get away from having that as a part of your because how you should think about life and business and wealth is think about it as your own support team, right? So what you really want is to have a stable like support system around you, right?
yeah,
And often for a lot of people that'll consist of an accountant, the lawyer, and you might have financial advisor as well, right?
yeah,
And those people you want them to communicate because then it makes things flow much easier if they communicate. But of course, I understand costs. So it just depends on what somebody can afford. Like if you can afford to go see some lawyers who can help you give you the advice and help you set up your things the right way, I think it's something that helps you significantly over time. You might not see the benefits immediately, right? But what I've seen is that if you don't set up things the right way in the beginning, it's much harder to then transition and do things differently down the track, right?
yeah.
So it's always, I see it as an investment. It's always good to get the advice, set up things the right way in the beginning, but just be mindful of what you can afford at the time as well. So there's no perfect answer on it. I think it's about what your budget allows,
Hmm.
but you just want to make sure that the people you're dealing with are do specialize, like let's say for lawyers, right? You do want to make sure that they have some areas that they specialize in so they understand, because then you can really look at everything. Because somebody might just think, oh, I have a business and this is what I need, right? And you'd be like, okay, I like to ask questions. So I'm like,
Yeah,
okay, cool. I want to learn a bit more like about the terms of your structure, right? You'd be like, I want to learn a bit more about your family, for example, right? So,
yeah,
are you single? Are you married? Do you have a partner, spouse? What is it, right? Your children, how old are they? Because that's all relevant in terms of your structures, right?
yeah,
And so, for example, if there's parents also who are like, oh, we want to give money to our children and everything like that, you're like, okay, cool. Are the kids in relationships? What's the situation there? Because that's relevant to your structure. So sometimes it's all these sort of peripheral questions that you ask around the main concern that help you be like, okay, I understand that what you want to do is this, but because of this other information I have about you, a better way to do it might be this, or these are
yeah.
the things that we need to worry about because you've got a risk here, here, and here. So that's really why I think it's very important to have that holistic aspect to it. So yeah, you just want to make sure whoever you get your advice from that's helping you set your things up, they understand what's going on and they're holistic about it. And yeah,
Now that we've talked about the big challenge cost, especially for Africans, right? Immigrant were trying to, even survive, first of all. And we don't actually think about, not all of us think about like that wealth planning, like, oh, how can I really structure my life that the decisions that I'm making, like you said, I'm taking an holistic approach. For example, I'm buying a
yeah,
house now, but I'm also thinking about what happens if I change jobs? But what happens if like my wife is pregnant and she's like out of job and she's not working and it's now a one income household for like 10 months or like 1 year. What happens if I lose a job temporarily? Like what happens if I want to buy next property or like I start a business? Like but then access, you've talked about look for somebody that is good, like specialized. Like how first two-tier question, how do we find these very good people that can help us? Of course, we can already find you now.
yeah, yeah. No, we're
But
always here.
yeah, but how should people be thinking about like finding that resource to help them, you know, take that holistic approach and plan and be proactive, like you said, and then at what cost? Again, these things are not cheap, right? And should they be thinking about let me get an accountant, a financial advisor, and a lawyer at a particular tier level, or find one person that can just give you wealth management advice? How should they think about it?
Um, I'd say so. The first part of your question about how you find it, I think referrals always play a good part. So if you know somebody who's dealt with someone before, you'd be like, okay, how was your experience with them? Did they manage to help you do what you want to do?
Mm.
And just I think the research here as well. But referrals, I would always say referrals is becoming a big way that people find out what other people's reputation is and what
Yeah,
their reviews are, that kind of thing. So if you do have people who have used some of those services before, then I think it's worth reaching out to them and being like, "Hey, would you recommend that I deal with this person and everything, right?" So I think I would say that's always a good starting point in terms of trying to find out. And there's now Google reviews are very popular as well, so people can actually read what people are saying about a certain service provider or an advisor. That's another one. In terms of cost, look, it'll be expensive to get all three sets of advisors at the same time, right? So it also depends about where you're at in the journey, right? But what you find is, at least I mean for myself, but what you find is some of the people in this space are happy to just have a first chat with you, right? And just be like, yeah, okay, cool. This can help you or can't help you, or you might not need my services at the moment
oh, I
necessarily.
some okay, you said some
Yeah,
because
some it
lawyers
depends
like
on how it depends on how each person takes it, right? Like some would just
yeah,
be like, they might just want to charge a first chat. Like
yeah,
me, I like to deal with people. I like relationships. So
yeah,
generally, and I try to make it a point with people I know that you can just give me a call and just have a chat. And if we can help you with something, then I'll be like, okay, cool, we can help do one, two, three, and this
yeah.
is what we'll need to do one, two, three.
Yeah.
If I can't, then I'll be like, yeah, look, I don't think what we provide is most appropriate for you right now. A
Yeah.
better alternative might be this, right? Because it's also about trying to point people in the right direction as well. Yeah, because
Yeah.
I think people appreciate sincerity.
Yeah.
Like if
Yeah.
you approach and someone's like, oh, and you just tell them like, yeah, I think what you're trying to achieve at the moment, this is probably a better, lower cost option for you, or it achieves what you need, or yes, this might be overkill and so on, right? And I
Yeah.
think people appreciate that you actually tell them, and you're not just like, yeah, 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 come with me,
Yeah.
just pay me a bunch of fees and stuff, and I'll do all of this and everything. I think it's just about finding some service providers as well who are just happy to like pick up the phone and have a chat, and
Mm.
that's why I really like personally like my accountant, for example. Great guy. Yeah. Because I knew, like, even from the beginning, it was always like, you just call me, have a chat, and then we see what we need to do or what I can help you with, etc. So, it won't be everyone who takes the same approach as a service provider, but there are out there. And at least that's how I like to operate. Yeah.
Yeah. That's an important point. Lately I've been thinking about also positioning to buy businesses in
Yeah.
future. Because I
Yeah.
feel like you would know starting a business is hard work. It's a lot, and I've started a
Yeah.
couple year in Australia,
Yeah.
and I know how tough it is, But again, I am thinking about. I think there's leverage, especially because these baby boomers are gonna be retiring, and there are always businesses looking to sell and don't even find buyers. And good businesses really that they have cash flow is working. You can bring your
Yeah.
own innovation there and then scale it up. How do you have any advice from a wealth management perspective? Like, do you have any experience of people who do that, or any information around that?
Oh, information in terms of what the buying and selling businesses
Yeah,
aspect.
and how it ties to like wealth management. Have you seen what structure we talked about structure earlier as well. Like, what structure should you be thinking? Do you think trust is better? Like, I don't know much about the trust, but I think it's something that I may need to actually explore in future. But yeah, do you and just any keen thing you can share
I
regarding?
think Yeah, I think when it comes to, you know, buying businesses or starting one and all of this, or even property, I think some of these similar concepts still apply in terms of, you know, like we see trust are very common in the business space from an ownership perspective, right? Like if you want to buy a business or start one or everything, what structure do you use to buy? And you see
Yeah.
that trusts are very common. But and a lot of that has to do with those, the estate planning, like from a family perspective as well, like family trust with everybody in there, and that becomes one of the family assets under the trust. But it's also like that whole tax thing, right? Like if you decide to eventually sell one of your assets later, then there's the whole CGT issue, and that's why I think trusts come up quite frequently,
Yeah.
because yeah, you get those benefits because the benefits are multifaceted. There's different aspects to them, and I see time and time again that where people's circumstances permit, to set up a family trust, especially financially, that a lot of people do like to go down that road just because once you buy in the structure, then you get certain benefits and everything, and also responsibilities as well. There's obligations to it, but you get certain benefits from a asset protection perspective, from a CGT perspective, those sorts of things. So I think they just keep coming up time and time again. Yeah,
So
yeah,
for somebody watching and they don't really understand that trust structure, like
yeah,
myself, I know, yeah, you can just structure anyway your maybe your partner and everybody have different of the business, but I've not really dived deep into it. Can you
yeah.
explain like what is that trust structure? Why is it like good for asset protection? A company also gives you like a PTY gives you that. I mean, from my understanding, so how is it different from that?
So a trust at its most basic level, a trust is it's an arrangement, right? It's a relationship. It's where one person says, "I'm going to hold this asset for on behalf of somebody else." That's
Mhm.
at the basic level. That's how it works, right? So The reason why trusts are a thing that's quite popular and people like to use them is because once, like, if you set up your trust and everything the right way and all of that, right? Then
Yeah.
on paper, you don't actually own the asset. So you
Mm.
can say like, I don't like, even though you get the benefit of the asset in certain circumstances, right? You don't actually own the asset, so it's no longer held in your name. So for example, what's an example?
Oh.
So like, let's say you set up a family trust, and then you decide to buy a house. So what would typically happen is, and as an example, you have parents, and let's say they've got two kids, right? What they'll do is they'll set up a family trust, and then they're all the beneficiaries under the trust, under that family trust, the four of them, parents and the two kids. And then they decide to purchase a house into the trust. And now, when they buy the house, the trust owns the house. So it's not mum who owns the house. It's not dad who owns the house. It's the trust.
Mm.
So basically, when mum and dad go about in their everyday life, right, and they're doing their things or whatever, let's say something goes wrong and then one of them gets sued. Let's say it's to do with their work or whatever, right? And then obviously when you get sued, people want you to pay out of the assets that you own. It'll be like, well, no, I don't actually own the house. The house is owned by the trust. So you can't actually sell the house because it's not mine.
Oh.
So it shifts ownership. Trusts are really about a big part of it is shifting ownership. So you don't own the item on paper; it's owned by this other separate legal person called a trust. And so
Mm.
that's why like you protect your assets because essentially if somebody now there'll always be exceptions depending on the exact circumstances, right? But if like in the normal course of things, that's why it's very good for asset protection because when somebody comes along trying to sue you or whatever, then you know that the stuff that's in your trust is protected and safe, right?
Mm.
Yeah, and you know it's safe, and that also is the same for like relationships. If somebody has a relationship breakdown, then you get a bit more safety knowing that the asset is not actually owned by the person who's, let's say, getting a divorce, right? It's owned by this family trust that exists separately, right? So at a basic level, that's how it functions. Yeah, there's a
Well,
few nuances to everything, but yeah, yeah,
so for because when I started business, started as a sole trader,
yeah,
obviously that's like tied to your life basically. And
yeah,
as we were scaling, you're like, okay, tax perspective, asset protection, this does not really scale, it doesn't help. We need to change to a company structure. Now,
yeah,
some of the considerations were now you are detached from the company. You own the company, but like it's not. If somebody sued the company, it's the company and
yeah,
not you.
exactly.
So, if somebody sued you in this instance, does your like with the company? Can they say, "Oh, you own the company as well. You need to maybe sell the company or get asset from the company in the company structure?"
If provide like if this is a qualification where like as long as you haven't done anything that's sort of like dodgy, because there's a lot of rules around how you like when things go wrong, what have
Yeah,
you been doing beforehand,
yeah.
and if you're doing anything sort of different, right? But if assuming you're operating the company and stuff the way it should be, and there's like certain duties you have when you're running a company and all this other stuff, as long as you've been doing things properly on the books, right? Like and doing what you should be and operating the right way, then yeah, then it's a company asset, then that's not your asset, it's owned by the company, and yeah, so that gives you some protection in that sense.
Mm.
I think one of the distinctions for me is more so around that issue of exactly what assets the company might have or where it invests and all that sort of stuff. Because when you sell, that's when you might have, for example, CGT that
Mm.
will apply. But if you sell, like let's say you sell a property and you're holding it with a company, then you just have to, and you have to pay capital gains tax, then you just have to pay it. But if it was held under a trust, you'd get a discount on that. So those are
Oh.
slight differences where, although a company gives you some protection, right? There's certain things that like a trust would give you that a company wouldn't. Yeah. So that's why.
So can somebody move from a company to a trust?
You You could, but often what people will do is what they'll do is when they set up the company and they're deciding who owns the shares, they'll set up a trust to hold the shares. That's what they'll typically do. So then they'll have a family trust that they set up, and then they'll decide to open their company and operate their business, but the company is owned by the trust. That's typically how people would do it.
Ah.
Yeah, you can, of course, there's options like you can do what's called like a trading trust and operate a business out of a trust. But in my experience, that's less common. In my experience, what typically happens is somebody will have a family trust, and then they'll set up so they have the trust over here, and then they'll set up their company, and then when they decide who owns the shares, the family trust will just own the shares. So if the family decides let's sell the business later, then the trust just sells the shares in the business, and then oh yeah, you got to pay some capital gains tax. You could get the discount, and then everyone keeps moving along it. That's typically how, at least in my experience. Like I know some of the lawyers may have different experience, but typically in my experience, that's the arrangement as opposed to operating out of a trust directly. Yeah, for the business.
Mm. Wow. That's so insightful because people don't know the impact of capital gain tax until you have to make a sale and you realize that, oh my goodness, this
They're
is
big numbers. You're like,
like
okay,
huge number. And that's when
yeah,
you appreciate your work, for example. Like, oh my God, I should have gotten like, better advice and I would have saved like thousands and thousands of dollars. So it's really, really important information there. So when it comes to people buying a house now, like if people want to like get into maybe more than one property, they want to
yeah.
get into investment and all of that. Do you think they should buy it under their name or they should do this trust thing as well as a
It
family?
as a so what that would consist of is we just sit down and have a chat with you and ask all these other questions.
Yeah,
Yeah, typically like because I can't just give general advice to everybody
yeah,
listening,
yeah,
right? But
yeah,
my personal preference would be like if I bought a place and then I wanted to buy a second or third place, my preference would be to try and get a family trust going and set it up, right? And to do those other ones. That's personally what my preference would be. So it's a matter of sitting down with the person and the potential client and being like, okay, this is what you want to do, and just getting a bit more information about their life and everything like that. And they were like, cool, we can do it this way. But definitely, like, if it's appropriate, a family trust is something that I'd be like, okay, well, that's an option that you have. If you want to buy, and this is how it works, and these are the benefits, these are the drawbacks, everything like that. But I definitely bring that up in the conversation with them if they're looking at buying, their second, third, fourth property, whatever it is. At the least, I'll just ask, like, because for example, I came across somebody who owns a couple of properties already, and I'm just like, did you consider a family trust at some point along the way? Because some people may have, for whatever reason, and decided not to go with it, right? But at least it's something I definitely bring up and be like, okay, well, have you considered it? Is it something you'd want to do? And if they're like, I don't know how it works, then you explain it and see if there's something they're interested in, right? But
yeah.
the least you can do is just at least give them the information and the opportunity to decide.
No, no, no. I think also the obligations are more complex, right? It's not like
Yeah.
just at the end of financial year, you just do your financial statement and lodge your tax. It's a lot more complex,
Yeah,
right?
there's a lot of rules around it when you have a trust because you've got the tax aspect, and again, this is where and tax returns. This is where it's good also to have that if you do have lawyers who help you, they have a relationship with your accountant, right? Because it
Yeah,
helps with those sorts of things. But also like just other obligations around actually operating the trust, right?
yeah,
And making sure that every year that if there's a company that's a trustee of the trust is doing what it should be, and like the governance side of things, making sure that all your documents are there, and all those sorts of things. There's a lot more admin work behind having a trust. Yeah,
mm,
there's a lot of admin behind it, and there's some more obligations in terms of tax returns and everything. But for a lot of people who do end up doing it, it's just their own assessment of being like, yeah, I think the extra work I have to do is worth the benefits I'll get from having
yeah.
one set up. Yeah, but it's not ever something that somebody should just go into lightly, and I'd never want to tell anybody to do that approach, right? Which is why you should always sit down, talk with somebody about it, make sure you understand, and then make an informed decision. Yeah.
No, that's so great. The reason why we are, talking about this is because again, as Africans, The way finance work back home, I don't know, maybe it's same in Zimbabwe, it's massively different from here. And there's so many things you want to learn. But for me, for example, I'm reading a lot of tax book, like how to save money on tax, different legal ways to save money. I was reading, is it this book? Yeah. I don't know if you've seen this book by this, one of the,
No, I've not seen that one.
yeah, it's
Actually, yeah, I
really,
might get you to message me that one after, and then I
yeah,
can have a
yeah,
read of
it's a really good book and it's tailored to Australian context. There's like 101 ways to save on tax. But even though there's so much information, some I don't understand because like that's not my field. I don't obsessed
it.
about this
Exactly.
thing. Like, that's why you need expert to really help provide advice. But yeah, in context of what I'm saying, so many people I see make mistakes when it comes to buying a house, and they may emotionally buy a house that they are buying because of now, right? The now, like I said, if something changes in their financial situation or their job, they are
Yeah.
under massive pressure, or maybe they now have extra child or children, and they've they've committed to a mortgage that was based on a current financial projection and all of that,
Yeah.
or massive issues for them, and which impacts quality of life because they're under stress every time they now have to do different job just to survive and all. I see that happen a lot. So in terms of like accessibility of this financial advice and really good advice, is there anything you would be able to do with your firm, like say, oh, like immigrant community, I have this consultation tier package where if you are trying to buy a house or you're trying, like, I don't know what it will be, but like just general advice, because I feel like people actually just consider those advice very expensive for their situation and they can't just afford it. So is this something you're gonna consider maybe creating that in
Yeah,
future?
yeah,
Yeah.
because that is something actually we have chatted about with my business partner is that education for us is also important for people
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
because what this really like a lot of what drove me to be where I am today and deciding to open the firm and just get involved with these sorts of things was me realizing the importance of education and information, right?
yeah,
And so one thing that we do want to do is the sort of like call it education or like I think seminars, that type of thing. Like
yeah.
if there's a group of people who are
Webinar.
interested in us presenting on a specific topic,
Yeah,
then we come in and we do that. Yeah, that's something that we do as well because we find that's also an easy way for people to get information as well. But yeah, like you can't understate the value of education in all of this, right?
no,
Sorry, overstate.
that's a
Sorry, yeah,
very, very. In fact, I have in talking about education. I'm in that space, and that was the gap we saw from a career perspective
yeah,
initially, and we were educating people. One step every week, basically just doing webinars, doing content, doing so
yeah,
many things. And now like over 1,000 people have been trained and so many of
yeah,
them are getting amazing jobs here, things that were like, oh, were not possible previously. So I still see a massive gap and so many
yeah,
people making mistakes,
yeah,
especially because like the popular thing is to buy a house, and then they just buy a house and don't think about long-term implications. So
yeah,
I
for sure.
think that education piece is very important for you to consider. Webinars. It won't be pretty. The first few ones, maybe you find a couple of people, but like as you do it more and more consistency,
Yeah,
you find that we're having an event in Melbourne. Maybe if you have time as well, on the 26th. So African people are gonna come.
yeah,
Maybe if you wanna, we can give you like 10 minutes talk about what you do, and some of these things we're talking about here as well.
yeah.
You can learn. You can also build connections with people as well, because I think that you have so much knowledge and expertise that is lacking.
No, thank you.
Is really lacking, and will save so many people. a lot of pain,
Yeah.
honestly. And I know because like I run businesses, I've researched property, like I
Yeah.
showed you, I'm reading about tax super, all
Yeah.
of those things, buying a business. So I know that, oh my goodness, there's a lot of things that people don't know. And
Yeah.
if they
Exactly.
if only they know, they're gonna save themselves stress and money. But anyway,
Yeah. No, definitely. Let me know about the event. I'd love to
yeah,
do that. That sounds really
yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great. So if you wanted to sum up our conversation today, in your own experience, just a zoom in, like what are the key things, mistakes? I know we've chatted about that, like, but real example, like just an example of one mistake you've had to deal with and help correct, maybe proactively or reactively, in your career so far. I hope I'm not putting you on the spot.
Say, let's think that's it. Correct.
It doesn't have to be anything big. Just
Ah,
uh,
I'd
uh,
say there was
yeah,
a and this was the value, this showed me the value of lawyers and doing their homework. Basically, there's a
yeah,
situation where a client was buying some property, it was to do with a development, right? And then, as a part of the process, we had to do some homework on the property they're buying to
yeah,
make sure that it's all like, checks out and everything. And so, what we realized when we were doing searches and actually looking through all the documents was that there was a big tax debt that
mm,
was owed on the property, right?
mm,
And then, so we basically told the client, we're like, look, this is the situation. So, what you're going to need to do is we're going to get in contact with them and tell them that, now, before this proceeds, this needs to be paid and dealt with. Because otherwise, that just would have been one of those things that they wouldn't have been aware of, and it would have
mm,
just caused a headache. So that was just purely from us just sitting down, looking through all the documents and just reading, like, okay, yeah, cool. Well, what's this? What's this? And then asking questions. Is okay, why is this number here? Okay, there's
yeah,
this tax debt. Okay, how did this get here? And then you're like, okay, no, 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 this is something that you need to fix. And we
yeah.
tell them, we're like, get this sorted, otherwise fine. Otherwise, we're like, yeah, comfortable with the other items, but that tax, that unpaid tax issue was the big one, yeah.
No, that's brilliant. I'm. Are you guys using AI, to assist you in your work at the minute?
Yeah, AI is one of those things that we do like to incorporate, right? Because it's become so common in law as well. Because, for example, like typically, I remember the days when I started practicing, yeah, and then
Yeah,
so one of your the partners, one of your bosses would be like, go and research this topic for me, right? And so you do the thing where you sit at the computer and then you put in some stuff on Google, and then you're like, okay, nah, this might not be it, and then you spend a lot of time trying to find
looking.
the answer, right?
Yeah,
Going around and all of that. Um, and then eventually you go there and you're like, okay, this is the answer, and they're like, nah, keep looking, right? So one thing that it became very useful for, like AI and stuff, was pointing you in the right direction
mm,
and saving you that initial time.
yeah,
So, for example, if you have a certain question about saying, "Oh, which part of the law can I find information about this?" You could just punch that in, and then it sort of gives you a starting point, right?
yeah, yeah,
And it
yeah,
saves you a lot of that time where you're looking around on Google and not knowing
yeah,
what's going on.
yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, so that's become a big thing in terms of legal practice is just the research aspect and just getting quick answers to stuff. But always like I recognize I'm not going to use something that I got from AI without double checking.
Absolutely.
So even if it says, oh, section 50 says
Yeah,
this, I'm
yeah.
going to look up section 50
50
and make
confirm.
sure that that's what it actually says
Yeah,
before I actually rely on that information, right?
yeah,
Because you get all sorts of stories about people who use AI, or I heard a story recently about someone asked a question about something and then it even provided the source, right? Because how some of them can
yeah,
provide you a link,
yeah,
a
yeah.
link.
Yeah.
So basically, it provided a link to the page where the information was. But once you actually open it, you realize that the section it was talking about was an old version
Oh,
and it had actually changed.
yeah,
So if somebody didn't actually bother to go through the link, actually check and read it, they would have just thought, oh, it must be current, it's
yeah,
correct, right?
yeah.
So I think there's no substitute for that. It's
Yeah,
about knowing its place. You
yeah.
can't let it do the job for you, but I think there's a lot of ways it makes things efficient, right?
No,
Yeah,
absolutely. I'm just like playing the devil's advocate here, like, you know,
yeah,
so I get like contract terms and documentations from real estate or whatever, and then I pop it into an AI to like summarize this like a lawyer, like Peter, the best lawyer that I know would do, and it comes back with like all of this stuff. You know, typically I mean, just like, oh, okay, that's fine. Um, but you're saying, please do not totally rely on that as well, right? Because
yeah.
hey, because there's still you need to cross check. Even if I cross check, I think there's some domain knowledge experience that you
Yeah.
still need to actually get that advice from, correct. Yeah.
Yeah, because I know like
Mm.
even if I ask for like like I've advice about investment stuff, right, in there, it'll give me some answers, but I know that it's not the same as
Yeah.
speaking to someone who specializes in it, right? Like
Yeah.
I think AI is useful. It's something that has the potential to make our lives more efficient, easier, save us a lot of time, right? But I think I personally just would not rely on it
Yeah.
completely.
Yeah.
I'm just not comfortable with it. Like, cool that the lawyer and me just being too nitpicky, but yeah, when it tells me something, I'm
No.
like, okay, let me actually see if I can find this answer and double check myself. Um,
No. No. That's
and of
that.
course, like, sorry.
No. No. You go.
There are definitely softwares that do help you with things like reviewing a contract and stuff, right?
Yeah.
But if I'm to, I like to read them, so I actually just read through, right? And as you get more experience, you also start to know what to watch out for and where you're finding it, right?
Mm.
So even if I'm to use that type of software and it gives me certain answers and it's like, okay, this is what you need to worry about. These are the main points. Even if you're asking it to read a case for you and summarize, I'd still want to actually go through and make sure, like, okay, it's saying that this is from this part of the case. Does that part of the case actually say? And just actually going through the manual element to it and just double checking.
Yeah.
Because one thing that I'm conscious of as a lawyer is I never want to give somebody advice about something that I don't understand.
Yeah.
Like, and I want
Yeah.
to make sure that I take the time to actually read it
Yeah.
and understand it myself before I can sit there and say to you, okay, sweet, yeah, this is so and so. I just don't feel comfortable with that approach.
Yeah.
Because it's all about trust and reliability. Like if I become your lawyer, right? And then I want to have a relationship with you where you're like, okay, I know that if Peter is saying this,
Yeah.
he knows what he's talking about and he's checked it and it's correct,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I always think it's important as an advisor, especially, that you don't go telling things to your clients that you haven't checked for yourself and you've made yourself comfortable that I understand it, this is correct, I can give clients advice about it. That's just personally my approach because you're in a very special position. Because, yes, like when you hire a lawyer, they'll tell you, like, you should double check these things. But in reality, a lot of the time, people place a lot of trust and faith in you as the advisor as
Yes.
to what they
Yeah.
should do.
Yeah.
So I take that aspect of it very seriously. So I'm like, cool. If I'm going to be telling someone this is what I think you should do,
Yeah.
then I want to be comfortable that I've actually done the homework myself,
Yeah. No, no,
right? Yeah,
that's very important, and we're gonna be a team, so I can't be like,
exactly.
oh, like, oh, I'm not sure. I need to check again and check again with somebody else. That's
Yeah,
just
because
incompetent.
if you ever need to second guess me, I've
Oh,
failed my job.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
like, nah, that's not
Yeah.
that's not where we should be at, right? Because
Yeah.
you should have if and obviously that takes time to build that trust and
Yeah.
relationship.
Yeah.
But you should know, okay, I like this person's work ethic. They check their stuff, it's thorough, it's correct, they know what they're talking about. So then I can become comfortable. And
Yeah.
that's what I learned in some of the places that I've worked at, right? Which really made me feel inspired was I worked in some places where the clients just had a lot of faith in us. If we're like, yep, cool, this is what you should do, they'll be like, cool, do it. Right? But that comes from the time of actually the client
Yeah.
knowing this is how you operate. You're onto it, you do the homework so
Yeah.
they can rely on you. So yeah, I think yeah, as an advisor, you got to take that responsibility seriously.
Yeah. I want you to forward this final question. So we're building some apps in
Yeah.
my company, for example, and we try to engage some lawyer, like passively at the point, and just to get privacy policy and terms of conditions.
terms of
Sometimes,
use. Yeah.
yeah, it's a lot of it's a lot of money for an app. We don't know if it's gonna work yet because you're still kind of like building. So I then go look at all my competitors, like terms and condition, benchmark it against our requirement, what we're building, use AI to generate our own terms and condition. Um, as the best lawyer in the world, of course, AI playing that role.
Yeah.
Um, you think there's still like um, issues with that, like with doing that?
Oh, just with the AI.
Yeah, using
Yeah,
that. Yeah,
I'd say you want to get a pair of eyes over those things, right?
mm,
And it just depends on who you approach, like which lawyers will charge less, some will charge more. But I think generally with those sorts of things, you do want to get a pair of eyes over it just to double check and make sure it's done. And look, there'll be some lawyers where they might say, for example, they'll charge less if it's just reviewing what you already have, and then obviously they charge more to prepare it from scratch. So you can also find some lawyers who will say like, yeah, we'll just review what you have and just give you comments if it needs something else to be a bit more airtight,
yeah,
versus as an alternative in terms of price, right? And instead of being like, yeah, can you please just write everything from scratch and prepare something new for me? So
mm,
it's those sort of options. But I think yeah, I don't want to bag on AI, but yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's all right. Thanks for that. Any last comment from you? Any question that I've not asked you that you think I should have actually asked you?
No, honestly, like the chat has been really good. We covered a
Yeah,
lot of things. I guess
yeah,
the main summary I'd have is advice. Make sure you get advice before you make big commitments, right?
yeah,
Do your homework. You have to take the time to do your due diligence, do your homework, understand what you're signing up for, and that sort of thing before you make these commitments, right? Like buying a
yeah,
house and everything like that. And that also helps with things like the government schemes. It's information, like it's information that's there that if you just knew, oh, I could have done this. There's nothing worse than finding out later, oh,
yeah,
I struggled to buy my first house and I could have done this. It would have made it easier. And now
yeah,
you're like, oh my God, I went through all of that stress for nothing. So again,
yeah,
that's just the information thing, right? So I think yeah, or like take the time to research, get the information that you need so that you know what's going on. And if it's something that's out of your depth, I think invest in good advice. Yeah, invest in
yeah.
advice. That's what
No,
I'd say for people.
so
Yeah,
that's very important. And guys, finally, read books. For example, this helped me with a lot to
yeah,
question my accountant as well. Like, hey,
yeah,
have we done this? When are we doing this? It's really, really important. It will save you money as well. But thank you so much, Peter. Where can we find you? I'm sure we can find Peter um, on LinkedIn, right? It's just Peter Mazuriri.
yeah. So
Mazariri.
Peter Muzariri, yeah.
Muzariri, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm
Uh,
on LinkedIn, and then yeah, we got our firm website as well. If people want to ever jump on the website and have a look,
yeah.
and then just see like what services we have and that type of thing, they can reach out to us on there. So yeah, pretty much everywhere like LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, all of those. Yeah, I'm all over the place.
No, that's great. We're gonna put that in the description as well. But thank you so much for your time. I don't take it for granted. Yeah, we're gonna keep the lines open. If you want to reach out to Peter, please reach out to him. His contact is gonna be in the description below. Thank you so much
No,
for
thank you for
stopping
having me.
by.
It's been awesome having this chat, and
Yeah,
yeah, honestly, thank you for having me. That's really awesome. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed
nah,
talking about stuff. So you're doing me a favor, to be honest.
thank you so much. Really,
Thank you.
really insightful. I learned a lot as well. I appreciate you. Thank
No,
you.
thanks, Noah. I appreciate you, man.
Yeah.